It's so dusty in here, like no wonder my eyeballs, like I can't even freaking see. This is going a lot faster than I thought. I'm gonna start like putting some of these away because my pile's getting a little big here. I have no idea. I have no idea what is going on. Hello book lovers, welcome back to the channel. My name is Steph, and in today's video I will be sharing with you the 25 books that I want to read in 2025. So I've seen a lot of these videos going around, and I definitely knew that I wanted to participate in this. For one, I do want to keep myself accountable for reading a lot of these books. And for two, all of these books are ones that I have had on my radar for a little bit of time, and I just feel like for some reason I keep pushing them off and pushing them off. So I feel like if I have this video that I will actually be able to read the books throughout the year of 2025. These are not going to be like new books that have come out. These are mostly going to be 25 books that I have on my radar that I really want to get to in the next year. So some of these are like newer releases, but most of these are definitely backlist titles. Okay, so these are going to be in no particular order, but I am definitely going to start with a couple of books that are part of series, and these are obviously going to be on the list because I just want to close out the series. So I will start with the books that will help me finish off a couple of my series, and then I will just talk about all of the other books in no particular order. So starting off very, very strong, the first book I have for this list is going to be Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. This is the last book in the Throne of Glass series. It is the last book that I need to read for this series. I did start this in 2024. I read all 7 books like back to back to back to back, and then I feel like I just burnt myself out and I just could not finish this. So this is definitely a priority read for 2025. Then I have A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. This is the last book in the Darker Shade of Magic trilogy. I do have plans to read this in January, so I am very excited that I will finally be able to finish off the series. I originally read book 1 a very, very long time ago, and then I completely forgot what happened, so I had to reread book 1, and then I immediately picked up book 2, and for some reason I just did not pick up book 3, but I do have plans to read this in January, so this one is definitely going to happen. And then I also do have the Fragile Threads of Power, which is the like companion series to this series. I don't know if it's a prequel or a continuation, but I do have that, so it would be really nice to finish reading this and then jumping into that. Another series that I do not hear anybody talking about anymore. It was very, very popular on BookTube a few years ago, and now the hype has just completely died down, and if I'm being completely honest, I am very scared to finish off this series because I have heard nothing but negative things about the last book in this series, but it was one of my all-time favorite series back in the day when I read it, and that is going to be The King of Crows by Libba Bray. This is part of the Diviners series. This is the last book in that, so once I do finish this, I will be able to close out that series. This is a YA fantasy series with a backdrop of New York, and it is very, very magical, and I 100% would recommend The Diviners, which is book 1. It is so like cool, and the story was just so interesting. We do follow our main character Evie, and again, this is like a backdrop of New York. It takes place in like the 1920s, and it just gives me like all of those like speakeasy vibes. So I 100% recommend the series, but again, I haven't heard the best things about this one. And then the last book I have in terms of series that I want to finish is going to be Hunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. I did read book 1 last year, and I did for the most part enjoy it. I have heard that this one does get a lot more dark and is not as good as the first one, but it is only a duology, so I do want to read it so that I can say that I finally finished this duology. If you do not know what this is about, this is a dark romance series, and a lot of people have said that it is like one of the darkest ones that they have read. If you are interested, I would definitely look into trigger warnings for this one, but yeah, this is going to be the last book I have on this list that is part of a series. So then I have 2 books that are by the same author. I have never read from this author before, but I have seen so much hype, and I have heard that these are 2 of the like best fantasy novels that have like ever been written, so I am so curious to get into this hype. So the books that I am talking about are going to be The Sword of Kaigan and also Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wang. Like I said, both of these are fantasies, so I will talk about The Sword of Kaigan first. I have heard that this is like such a emotional read, and it is going to like pull at your heartstrings. There are going to be moments in here where you just like do not see things coming, and this sounds exactly up my alley. I again am not like a huge fantasy reader, so I am hoping that this is an easy read read for people who aren't 100% into fantasy. Let me know if you have read this and you think that this is like something that a beginner into the fantasy genre would be able to comprehend. It just sounds so good, and I am very excited to get to this one. Then I have Blood Over Bright Haven, which does say that it is a standalone fantasy, which is very good for me because I don't like to commit myself into like really long fantasy series. So this does say it is following our main character who does go into this like order of mages, but then she discovers some secrets that are part of this order. And this has also been getting just such good like reviews and hype. These both have like really high ratings on Goodreads, so they are definitely going to be some of my like priority fantasies for the new year. Then another book that was getting a lot of hype, and I just have so much FOMO from not reading it, and that is going to be Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. This I have heard compared to Caraval by Stephanie Garber, but just a lot more like adult and better, I feel like. This is essentially following sisters. One of the sisters, Ophelia, does find her mother murdered and then inherits her magic, and then her sister decides to enter Phantasma, which is like a competition that is going to like test all of your abilities, but if you do win, you are granted one wish. This cover is absolutely stunning, and everybody that I have seen talking about this has absolutely loved this book, so I definitely wanted to put this on my list. Then I have The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. This is on this list because Leigh Bardugo is just like an auto read author for me at this point. I really vibe with her writing style, and I do typically like the books that she writes. This also just seems like completely up my alley in terms of like content in this book, so I feel like this may be my favorite Leigh Bardugo. I'm not 100% sure because a lot of people have not been loving this, but I do believe that it does follow like vampires, which usually works for me, so I'm very curious to see how Leigh Bardugo writes about that. So then a book I do have on my January TBR, so I know for sure that I will be reading it very soon, and that is going to be Feybound by Sarah El Arifi. This does say that it is the first book in a trilogy, so I am really hoping that I do enjoy this one because I know that the second book comes out very soon. This is following two elven sisters who get trapped in this Fey world. I have heard such good things about not only this book, but this author in general, so I'm very excited to dip my toes into their writing style. Then another one that is absolutely getting all the hype, or was at least getting all of the hype last year, and that is going to be One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This is a dark fantasy, and I believe it is a duology. Both books are out. I only own book one, but this just sounds completely up my alley. I love the like gothic vibes of a fantasy novel, and this feels like it is just going to deliver on so many different levels. I believe that there are monsters involved in this one as well, so I am very excited to dive into this one. Then one that is on my list because I have read from this author before, and her books were some of my favorites that I read last year, and that is going to be A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. I absolutely love Rebecca Ross's writing, so I knew I immediately wanted to dive into her backlist. I did pick up both A River Enchanted and A Fire Endless, which is the sequel to this, because I just wanted to again dive into her backlist. I am very excited to pick this one up, and I hope that I love it as much as I did Divine Rivals. This also says it is just a duology, so I would just have to read this and then the sequel, which again I do own. I believe that this is following missing girls, and our main character is kind of the only one that can solve the mystery behind it. This sounds absolutely perfect. I don't know when I'm going to get to this, but this is giving me like very fall vibes. Another extremely hyped book that I never got around to reading in 2024, but I feel like the newest book in this series is coming out this year, so I feel like now is a perfect time to pick it up, and that is going to be Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This, again, I don't think I need to explain myself with this. Everybody and their mother, I feel like, has read this book. I am the only one that has not hopped on to the bandwagon, but I am definitely going to prioritize this in 2025. I do know that a lot of people who don't typically enjoy fantasy do find that this is a lot easier to digest, and it does involve dragons, so that is a bonus. I absolutely love reading about dragons. I think that they are just like super fascinating, and I'm very excited because, like I said, the newest book in this series is coming out very soon. I do believe that those were all of the like fantasy that were on my list. I feel like I must have sorted my list previously. I thought that they were all going to be just like random. I feel like I did have some sort of like sorting system on my list, so I feel like that was all of the fantasy. So now moving on to some more just like general fiction. The first book I have here is going to be James by Percival Everett. As as you can see, this is just the dust jacket of the book because I am actually currently reading this book. I decided to pick this up at the very end of the year. I will not finish it by the end of this year, so it definitely will be one of my first reads for 2025. But I had just seen this book getting so much hype. It has won a ton of awards, I feel like, and everybody who has read this, I feel like, has just absolutely loved it. So I really wanted to read something that is not typically part of my like regular reading genres. This is a reimagining of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, where we are actually reading from the perspective of Jim. I have never read the original source material for this book, so I never read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I don't know the story at all, so this actually is perfect because I don't feel like I know the direction that this story is going to take. I am about 30% of the way through with this book so far, and I'm absolutely loving it. It is giving like very much 5-star energy right now. So yeah, I will definitely be finished this in 2025, and I wanted to add this to my list, but I am currently reading it. The next book is one that is super old. I don't feel like I hear anybody talking about it. It did have a lot of hype back in the day when I was like originally on BookTube, and then it completely like nobody talked about it anymore. Everybody I have seen talking about this previously has said that this is like one of the best books ever, and that is going to be Yoke by Mary H.K. Choi. This is a story about two sisters, and they are no longer like speaking, or they are just very estranged. They don't really talk to each other, and I don't know if there was something that happened that like strained their relationship, but then one of these sisters ends up getting diagnosed with cancer, and the other sister is the only one that is able to help her. Again, this sounds like it is going to be super hard hitting. I do not hear anybody talking about it, but I have had this on my TBR for so long, and I am putting it on this list to keep myself accountable because I definitely am going to prioritize this in the year of 2025. Another one that is very old, very much was like all the hype back in the day, and now nobody talks about it, but I added this so many years ago and I just never got around to it. And that is going to be The Wicker King by Kay Ankrum. This is a book, again, everybody was talking about it, and now I don't see anyone talking about it. I was originally very much interested in this book, but upon reading some reviews recently, I feel like this book is a lot different than a lot of people were expecting. I feel like it is a lot more of like a strange writing style than people were expecting, and that usually doesn't really work for me, but I definitely wanted to put this on the list because, again, I have had this on my like want to read for a very long time. I am just a little bit nervous now after reading those reviews to see if it would be actually something that I am interested in. The only thing I know about this story, which is the thing that really made me interested in this book to begin with, is that the way that it is told is like the pages start to get darker and darker as you go through, and that is supposed to signify our character becoming more and more like dark in his thoughts and the way that he is feeling. So I thought that that was just like super clever, and that is what originally made me want to read this book. So I am definitely going to read this in 2025. I am just not as excited as I originally once was for it. Then I believe that this is one of the only romances on this list, and that is going to be Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. This is again another series that I have seen kind of everywhere, all over Book Talk, on BookTube. Everybody has been reading this, and I have heard that it is very hard hitting. So those are the types of romances that I really enjoy. Again, the only thing I do know about this is that I have heard it is very hard hitting. It is following two main characters who I feel like the male main character becomes kind of obsessed with our female main character and just trying to like protect her and wanting to save her, and she kind of just wanted to keep a low profile, but then meets him and her plans kind of get uprooted. I am very curious to see how I feel about this. A lot of the times with like very popular romances, I have the like unpopular opinion, but if it is very hard hitting, I'm sure that I will absolutely love this and eat it up. The next two books I have to talk about are on this list because last year I read books by these same authors, and they were some of my favorite books that I read that year. So the first one is going to be Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. If you guys have been on this channel for a little bit, you know that Bury Your Gaze by this author was one of my favorite books of the year. It was actually my #1 favorite book of last year, and this is the book that came out before that, so I definitely want to read his backlist. The only thing I know about this is that we are following a backdrop of Camp Damascus, which is a gay conversion camp, and it is a horror book. I have heard really good things about this one as well, so I am so excited to jump into this. I am going to try to get this on a TBR very soon. And then I also have have Lost Gods by Brahm. Again, I did read Slewfoot by Brahm and absolutely loved it. It made my honorable mentions for my 2024 best books of the year. I did not think that Brahm would be for me. For some reason, I just got this vibe that their writing style wouldn't be for me, but I absolutely loved Slewfoot. So I'm very excited to jump into Brahm's backlist as well. And this is the only other book by Brahm that I own, so I definitely wanted to put this on the list. The next book I have is one that I am so surprised I decided to put on this list, because if you guys know me, you know me in classics, we just do not vibe. But this classic, I feel like I have like 3 or 4 different copies of the same book and I have never read it, and I just feel like it's going to be the only classic that I actually vibe with, and that is Dracula by Bram Stoker. Again, I do feel like I know the story of Dracula, but I definitely have never read the actual like classic Dracula. I am a little bit intimidated because classics a lot of the times are just uninteresting to me and go right over my head, but I feel like if there is one classic I'm going to enjoy, I'm hoping it is this one. Then a book that I put on this list because I remember like talking about it in a book haul, I think, and then someone commented saying that they absolutely loved this book, and it just started to get me like really curious to read it, and that is Falling by TJ Newman. I just read the back of this book and it actually says that the author is an old like flight attendant. So I find that very, very interesting that she did decide to write a book about a plane crash, because she probably has like all of the like ins about being a flight attendant, and I bet you that this book is probably really well researched. So the only thing I know about this is it is a thriller, that we are following a plane where the pilot's family has been kidnapped, and the only way that he can like save his family is if he kills everybody on board. I originally was interested in this book, and then I didn't even think about it until I got that comment on one of my videos, and I was very much intrigued to put this on the list because I do have the other book in, I don't think that it's a series, but it's also by this author, and I also believe that it has a plane on the cover as well, so I am just very curious to see how I feel about it. The next book I have on this list is one that I actually tried via audio, and I was so confused listening to the audiobook that I just kind of gave up a couple of chapters in and just decided that I would be like physically reading it, and that is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This is a mystery and thriller. This, I believe, follows a backdrop of a summer camp, and somebody that is attending this camp ends up going missing, but there is more of a mystery behind that because I believe that the missing girl's brother also disappeared like years prior. Again, I did try this via audio like a couple of months ago, and I was just so confused by the story. There are so many characters and I was just not able to keep it straight, so I decided that I would be physically reading this book. I definitely do like the backdrop of a summer camp, and I definitely want to make sure that I am understanding the story completely, so I am going to annotate and physically read this, but I did want to add it to the list because I am very much intrigued by this story. Then 2 books that I did get from my Aardvark subscription that I am very interested in reading this year. One is on my January TBR, so I definitely will be reading that, and that is American Rapture by C.J. Lead. This is an adult horror where I believe that it is following a virus that is taking out a lot of the world's population, and this I don't think has gotten the best reviews, but it is on my January TBR, so I definitely will be reading this year, and it is a priority for me for sure. Then another book that I put on this list that I am slightly scared to get into because I did read this author's previous book and it just wasn't the like type of horror that I was looking for. It's not really my style, but I do want to give this author another chance, and that is going to be Private Rights by Julia Armfield. This is the Aardvark edition that I have. I don't know which cover they use, but it's definitely not the US cover because the US cover looks quite different than this one. The only thing I know about this is that it is a like literary horror, I believe, and we are following 3 sisters who are grieving the death of their father. Again, this author's other work didn't really work for me, and I feel like this one also probably won't work for me, so I don't really 100% know why I put this on the list. But one thing I do know is that I do want to try to physically read this because I feel like when I listen to an audiobook like this, I just cannot like pay attention to the story, so I'm definitely going to be physically reading this, and I do hope that I am actually able to get to this book in 2025. And finally, the last 2 books that I have on this list are 2 that I do not own, but that I am very much excited for, and that I will probably be purchasing my own copy of them. And they are both ones that are on my horror bingo board that I am doing for the year of 2025. It did start in 2024, and you do get until October of 2025 to complete your bingo board. And that is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. review. This I don't know too much about. I do know that it is a horror and that people have been absolutely loving this book. I have heard nothing negative about this book, and I have heard that this author is incredible. I have personally not read anything by Tanana Reeve Dew, but if I do end up enjoying this book, I will be adding her entire backlist to my list of books to read. The only thing I know about this is we are following a young boy in the 1950s who gets sent to this reformatory school, and there are a lot of haunting things that happen. I have heard that the author does pull like real life traumas into her writing, so I am very curious to see how the story is told. And again, I have heard that this book is just absolutely incredible. It is one of my like top priorities for the year of 2025. And finally, the last book on this list is another one that I do not own, and that is The Black Farm by Elias Withrow. This is one that I again have had on my want to read for so long. It is also on my horror bingo board, and I definitely want to prioritize this for 2025. This is another horror, and I know that it will not be for everyone, but I just feel like listening to reviews on this book and people that I know talking about this book that have enjoyed it, I feel like this will be right up my alley. This is a very interesting concept for a book. So essentially we are following a couple who I believe loses a child, and both of them are not able to cope with that loss, and they decide that the only way to cope is to actually take their own lives. So they do decide to do that, but then one of them wakes up and realizes that death is not what it seems to be and not what they thought was going to happen when they died. This sounds like such a unique story and not something that I have ever read before. Again, I did have this on my want to read for a very long time, so I am hoping to prioritize this in 2025. If I do enjoy it, I definitely want to get myself a physical copy. And again, this concept just sounds like something that I have never read before, and I absolutely love finding books with very unique concepts. That is going to be it for today's video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed me kind of running through all of my priority reads for the year of 2025. Please let me know down below in the comments what some of your priority reads are. I definitely love finding new book recommendations based on what you guys are excited to read. A lot of the times when you guys comment on my videos, I do get a lot of ideas and put books on my want to read based off of that. That is it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you did make it to the end of this video, leave behind the fireworks emoji to kind of represent the new year. If you did like today's video, I would love it if you hit that thumbs up like button. And as always, if you are new here, I would love to have you stick around. So please hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys all in my next one. Bye.